Hello and welcome to Backyard Farmer. I'm your host, Kim Todd, and we'll be taking the next hour to answer those landscape questions. You can submit those pictures and emails to byf@unl.edu. Make sure you tell us as much as you can about your question. Please remember to tell us where you live. Also understand that due to the number of questions we're receiving every week, we cannot possibly answer everybody's questions on air. So if you go to our Backyard Farmer YouTube page, you can watch those past programs. There's a really good chance you'll hear similar questions answered. You can also keep up with Backyard Farmer during the week on our social media pages, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, and as always, we start with samples. Jody, you brought plants and a spray bottle.
Yes, that's my management. That's later. But I brought aphids, and usually aphids are not fun to bring because you can't see them. But these are something that most people are seeing them, especially if you have milkweed in your garden. So these are oleander aphids, or we call them milkweed aphids. They're bright yellow if you can see them closely. And so aphids actually can feed on like 97% of vascular plants, so there's probably an aphid for every plant. You know it's an aphid if you can put it under a hand lens and you can see cornicles or little tubes, 2 tubes on their abdomen, and that secretes like a defensive wax. However, the reason why these can become a problem is that after time, in a lot of the population here, you can get sooty mold or black sooty mold, which is a fungus that occurs because they excrete honeydew. So they feed on the plant sap and sugars, and then so they produce honeydew. Honeydew is what happens and what occurs with the sooty mold. And also you can see ants feed on the honeydew. So a lot of times, you know, we wonder why ants live outside, most of them, and because they're feeding on a lot of sugars outside. But you will also see winged ones, you will see non-winged ones, all different sizes, because they reproduce parthenogenically, which means they don't need to mate. So they're all females. Some have wings, some don't. What I do to get rid of them if they're too many, because I don't want the black sooty mold, is that I just take a spray bottle like this and I put it on the, I guess the whatever concentrated kind of, what do you want to call it? And then I like hit them off of the, you know, not usually inside, outside, and they'll fall off and they won't be able to get back on. But you've got to do this every couple days. I do leave a fair amount on there for natural enemies. There's also going to be syrphid fly larvae. There's going to be ladybugs and lacewings, all sorts of things. And parasitic wasps will parasitize them. And if you look really closely, you'll see these little, like, balloon-looking aphids. Those, we call those aphid mummies. And so that's nature doing its thing. And if you have more problems with that, you can use like insecticidal soap. But a lot of times, just a strong burst of water will take care of those for you.
As long as you have really good aim.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. You don't need something, you know, something special. Just spray bottle.
All right, Lauren, you have spots or rots?
Well, and this is the best time about this time of year. There are lots of rots and spots out there, and particularly now where we had some rain and we get some high humidity, we'll see even more. This is one that is just a common foliar disease on Rudbeckia. And you can kind of see these dark discolored areas, and then as these expand, they get larger and kind of have a gray center, you can see in here. And inside each of these lesions, there would just be thousands of little spores that could spread and be kind of the seeds for disease to spread that disease to other leaves. Something that can get pretty severe. One thing that's nice, though, that everyone can do in their garden is try to space their plants out so you get good air movement. So if you have, you know, a perennial bed and you have different plants in there that you see foliar diseases, doing some thinning, trying to have some distance between those plants can do a lot. And you wouldn't have to use a pesticide. Avoiding any overhead irrigation is the other thing. And then doing some nice cleanup in the fall and making sure you're managing your residue so that you're not having that disease next year.
Excellent. And you brought beauty.
Well, I brought my lovely wife went through the garden for me tonight after I got home from work and picked some things in the yard. So really, first of all, I kind of want to comment about something. So for high school students out there who are thinking about, what are they going to do someday? What a great field the plant sciences are. Here we have two people who are super enthusiastic about insects that are killing our plants and diseases that are killing it. I mean, they're full of joy because they get to talk about these things. I mean, isn't that great? So it takes all kinds of people. There's lots of places in the sciences for all of us. So it's great. It's a melting pot.
Art, which you just brought.
And then we have this. This is simple. This is easy, right?
Yeah, right.
So
That's
anyway,
something that can kill that.
yeah, I'm sure you do. You both do. I bet you get gone in 24 hours. I have no doubt. Really, what I was just thinking here with this collection of plants, so we have some dahlias, garden phlox, monarda, a little bit of liatris. I know, Kim, you brought that last week. We've got some daylilies. What's nice this year in our part of the state is we're having some nice warm days, which I don't mind, but we're also having some good rains. And so we'll be able to see these summer perennials continue to flower for a longer period of time versus many years when we have the heat and no rain, and so they're kind of short windows of time when we can flower. So we're really having extended bloom times right now, which is kind of fun. So we're just enjoying that.
Right, and this is, as you say, one of the hardest times of the season to get long-term bloom, especially if you're using perennials instead of annuals.
Right, right.
And orange with purple.
Orange and purple.
Excellent combination.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Jeff. All right, first round of questions. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 100. Jody?
It's a bug's life.
The first one, this is really interesting. This viewer sent 2 or 3. Her first one here is of a canna leaf. And, that's classic sapsucker damage, but what is it really?
It is. If it was like a tree bark, right?
Yeah.
This happened in my yard last year. So what happened when that leaf was all rolled up? The Japanese beetle started chewing, and then when it unfurled, you get those perfect lines.
Really? That is so interesting.
I thought you would like that.
And so your next one, she's got 2 or 3 others. This is on a calla lily, and she was concerned about the white striations or stripes, which is actually a part of the calla lily, but she's also concerned about this little critter here.
Okay, well, if the white stripes are part of the calla lily, then you're doing well with that. But with this one, this might be the yellow striped armyworm. If you're seeing more than these and you can't pick them off, you could treat with BT, but if there's not a lot of damage, I wouldn't do much because pollinators are going to love those flowers, right?
Right. Okay, and then she had a third one yet. She had all sorts of things going on. She wonders what this one is. This is actually in her horseradish.
Okay, this is the imported cabbage worm. So these are the caterpillar of those cabbage white butterflies that you're seeing a lot of. They like cabbage and broccoli, so they get pretty big, so you can pick them off.
All right, and squish. And then your next one here is, this is actually a student who went through the NUB lab class, which is fun. He found this on the driveway. He wants to know, is it a moth, a butterfly, a good guy, or a bad guy?
Okay, so this is going to turn into moth, and it's National Moth Week, so this is great. And when you see these big caterpillars that have these horns, a lot of times, they're going to turn into sphinx moths, which are big and beautiful. This one is the elm leaf sphinx moth, and you can tell because if you zoom in, there's like these 4 weird spines on its head, which I've never seen on another sphinx moth, so that was a good giveaway. But that was a cool find, so I would say good guy.
Excellent. All right.
National Moth Week.
It is.
Awesome. No idea. Got to advertise that more. Fun.
Fun. We should have brought all your collection of mothage.
I'd have brought some moth.
Out of mothballs. All right. On that note, Lauren, we have what is the cause of this on the corn is your first one. And your second one is bought this corn at a roadside stand, and what is it? So you got 2 in a row from 2.
Here's one that is absolutely beautiful, and there's another one. Wonderful. That's corn smut. And the interesting thing about corn smut is actually the spore of the fungus grows all the way down the pollen, it grows down the tube to go to the seed. So when you see the silk of the corn, if it's not pollinated and a corn smut spore lands on there, it takes the path of the pollen and takes over the seed ovule and develops into that mass. So to get a lot of this, if you'd like to, which I would encourage, you can, cut the tassels off your corn and then dust it with corn smut, and that's how they would grow it commercially because they do eat this also.
And you,
Beautiful one.
yeah, so it occurs randomly
Yeah.
otherwise, right? Yeah. All right.
Yeah, it's random.
Yeah.
It's great. Injury, plant injury can cause it too.
Cool.
It'll infect wound sites.
All right, and so your next one here, this is a papillion viewer. He says it's his 10th year trying to grow a garden. Each year he learns of a new fungus or insect. The new issue this year is this. What is this? Is this mold? Is it a black fungus? What is it and how does he combat this?
There's a couple things here. One is there's a mold there. And we could go down the road and say this is a botrytis fruit mold. But there may be something else going on that causes that fruit to abort and die early. So I hate to say this is a disease and try to put a fungicide on it, but look at other things that what could cause that fruit to abort early. It's unusual to see it like this in, I think it's cucumber, isn't it?
Yeah, it looks like
To see
raising candy or
cucumbers,
something.
or
Yeah.
something like that. So I would look for something else. I wouldn't try to manage the disease per se.
All right.
Avoiding overhead irrigation would be one thing, and if they're mulching things, that avoids some contamination from residue. But I'm hesitant to just say go after the fungus.
All right, and then you have two more pictures here. This is Louisville, within a quarter of a mile of State Rec. The soil is black soil, sandy loam, 1.5 inches of mulch, watered at the base. This is the second year of growth, and this is actually a thornless blackberry. He says the one end, the plants are curling and dying, and I think this is the trellis picture, and then we have one of this is what's going on.
Yeah, so with brambles, there's several different cane diseases. In this particular one, it has some long lesions, and I think it may be anthracnose. So one of the better ways to do this is manage it with sanitation through the years. So I have to ask him, are there any blackberries that fruit on first-year wood? These are all second-year bearers, I think, in most of the blackberries.
Yeah.
So making sure that you're thinning
Right.
out and taking out your old canes as it grows
Right.
would be one way to do that.
A good example would be our unruly Chester, the blackberry in our backyard farmer garden, which has threatened to take over all of East Campus.
Ah, nice.
And we do try to control it by taking out the old canes.
Okay, yeah, that's a biggie.
All right. Okay, Jeff, so your first two set of pictures here, this was utility work in an older neighborhood, 3 great big beautiful concolor firs that were planted several years ago using one of the giant 98-inch spades. Apparently equipment was parked right next to this one of the 3, and either the exhaust or the heat did this.
Sure.
I think we have a second, yep, there's the second picture. She wants to know what to do and will the tree survive this?
You know, looking at it, I would say the tree is going to survive it. I'm not concerned about that. And depending on how long ago this occurred, I wouldn't jump the gun to go in and start pruning out the dead quite yet. I want to give it some time here. So maybe if in the next 3 months, if you're not seeing any other recovery, any new needles or new growth on those branches, then you can slowly go in and start removing the dead branches. But yeah, you're going to have a bit of a hole, and over time, I mean, trees have a way of kind of filling in. So.
Right. All right, thank you. Your next one is from North Platte, and his question is a tree mat like this a good idea or a bad idea?
I guess I would say it's not a great idea. So I know they're easy and they're probably somewhat attractive if that's what you're looking for, and it's neat. But over time, I think there's probably some issues having rubber breaking down in your garden. That would be one thing that I would not be great or not happy about. But also it has some issues with making the soil too wet or too dry over a period of time. So I think you're better off taking that off and using an organic mulch.
All right, and then your final one here, this is a viewer with Japanese tree lilac. First off, he said it did struggle last year and this year. We've had a lot of questions with those this year. But then this is the picture he sent, a very large root as he was digging, and he's wondering if this root is the root of a lot of the evil on that jade tree lilac.
Well, it's a stem girdling root, and so as it enlarges, it's going to do increasing damage to that main trunk. So that said, and you and I were just talking before the show, that the Japanese tree lilacs the last couple of years are performing erratically. You know, there's some that look pretty good and then others that are having lots of issues. I was looking at some yesterday that the leaves are all, you know, very, very small. They're not growing. They're kind of multiple small leaves on these. So So I don't know if I jumped the gun yet on this, but I think that probably over time we're looking at replacing that
New
tree.
tree. All right.
Yeah.
Yep, thanks. Well, Nebraska was virtually a treeless state on the plains when it was discovered. We've planted a lot of trees since then, but one tree is starting to get a little out of hand. Eastern red cedar is becoming a major concern in pastures and acreages, so let's take a minute to hear about what we can do to slow its spread.
Eastern red cedar invasion is an issue that extends from the backyard to impact the bigger ranching community, but it's an issue that can have a lot to do with what we plant in our backyards, on the farm, in the ranch. So, historically, Eastern red cedar was a very rare species in the Great Plains, restricted to deep canyons and steep river banks where fires couldn't occur. So, when we think about its native distribution, and we think about how much we've planted the species and where we've planted it, we've really altered the species distribution in the Great Plains. And so states from Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, South Dakota are all dealing with this issue of Eastern red cedar invasion. And it's such a big issue because of the impacts. We can have up to a 75% loss in forage production, decrease in grassland biodiversity, a loss in surface water supply, as well as increasing spring allergens due to an increasing volume of cedar pollen in the spring, and an increasing wildfire risk. Because simply when cedar trees combust, they produce really large flame lengths. One of the biggest reasons that past management hasn't been successful is because invasion has simply outpaced our controls. So management has traditionally focused on restoration. And despite spending hundreds of millions of dollars on restoration in the Great Plains over the past few decades, the problem's gotten worse. What's actually happened is, with all these investments in restoration, the result has been a bigger need for restoration. Well, like a lot of species we hear about, management early on, or proactive management, is really key to better managing Eastern red cedar. So if we think about the invasion process, we start off with a grassland with no incoming seed sources. Historically, the majority of the Great Plains functioned this way, without incoming seed sources. Then once we have a seed source nearby, we have incoming seeds, but still a treeless state. Then we might transition to the next stage where we have only small trees that aren't seed producing. And then in the later stages of invasion, we have spread by mature trees producing seeds, and this eventual transition to a red cedar woodland. So if we can use management to manage for those early stages of invasion, so if we're using restoration, if we can push that system back to a treeless state, that's really key to improving. But then also, if we can target management in those earlier stages, that's really going to be key to better managing this issue. And so it's difficult. Getting ahead of this issue is going to take a new approach to how we come at this issue. People typically tend to respond when they can see the impacts. But we're saying is if we act much earlier, we can avoid those impacts and really have better outcomes.
This is certainly something to keep an eye on, especially if you live on an acreage. And if nothing is done, it won't be long before that beautiful view from that acreage is dominated by those trees. We're going to be talking about this on our Facebook Live Digging Deeper in a week or so with Duroc and Dylan, and go into a little bit more depth about those Eastern red cedars. So, all right, next round of pictures. Jody, your first one is a Carney viewer. She has several clusters of coneflowers, and in most of them, she's got this eruption-like growth. She's assuming there is a larva inside, so she's been throwing them in the trash. She wants to know what is laying the eggs and what can she do?
Yeah, so she's doing the right thing. That's what my coneflowers looked like last year, and there is a larva in there. So it's a moth that actually migrates up here from the south, and at night she lays eggs right at the base of the petiole there, and then the caterpillars come out, and then they feed in the seed heads, and they get really deep in there, so that's why it's really hard to control them, like with any type of spray. It's really having to manage it for the following year. So what you're doing by cutting them and disposing them is a good thing.
All right. Your second one here is Omaha viewer. She found this on her dill. She thinks they are purple carrot seed moth caterpillars, and she hopes not, and then she wants to know what to do because they're all over in her dill.
Yes, that's what they are. Good job. And we have them actually at the Hope Garden too. A lot of times people are growing dill for the swallowtails, and so we're looking close for those swallowtail caterpillars, and we are finding these, and they clump the little florets together with silk, and inside there's like a purple caterpillar with these white kind of like dots on it. So what you can do is, you can try neem oil or insecticidal soap, or you can prune out those flowers if you can. There may be other things you could use. We're not really sure like what the damage will be for people who are growing like dill and fennel, and I think it's like coriander, but because it's a relatively new caterpillar. So yeah, just trying to manage it the best you can by removing them.
All right, and your third one, this is a viewer who had eggplant, and they turned white like this. He thinks it's trying to spread to everything else. 7 days later, 3 more eggplants are doing this, and a row of beans are doing the same thing. So what is up with that?
Okay, so I would probably just get really close to this eggplant and look and see if there's like 2 spotted spider mites under there. You'd be able to see them on the underside. You can put like a paper under there and shake them, but you can also see the webbing. If it is spider mites, then there's a couple of things that you can use, but it's normally due to the heat right now. So keeping everything watered, and just if they are spider mites, then you can try to treat for them, but they will spread if they're not managed.
All right, thank you. Okay, Lauren, this is a viewer with cantaloupe. This is Glenwood, Iowa. On Monday, the plant looked great.
You can see the cantaloupes.
2 days later, came back, totally gone, none of the fruit, didn't see any insects. The rest of the garden looks okay. That's yours.
Those are dead cantaloupe, and unfortunately, there's not really much you can do right now. This is most likely bacterial wilt, and so with some of the melons, wilt can move very quickly. So in cucumbers and melons, it can move quickly. You can see the same disease in some other species where it's a little slower, but in this case, this was most likely brought in by a cucumber beetle that transmits it and did some feeding. What I'd recommend in this is to make sure you're using sanitation. My guess would be they probably had melons before or cucumbers or something in their garden, and maybe the residue was there. The beetles overwintered with the bacterium and then carried it into the new crop. So in the future, I'd really recommend using sanitation. You can also look online at bacterial wilt, and if you want to know for sure, you can cut the stems and kind of pull them apart. And there'll be this nice little stringiness that's actually the bacterial ooze in the vascular tissues, because that's where it gets to kill the plant.
All
so
right.
They can see that.
So should they put that material in the compost pile or not?
In this particular case, if you composted it well, it would be okay.
All right.
But making sure you're really composting and getting it hot and fully broken down.
All right, thank you. And then your next one, this is an Aurora viewer. She said just as her green beans should be ready to pick, the majority started curling, developing these dark spots. The leaves look diseased. She wonders if it is a disease, is there a fungicide she could use that wouldn't sacrifice the harvest? And if she plants a second crop in the same area, can she prevent them from getting the same disease?
So the leaves and the pods are from the same plant. Okay. This looks a lot like a bacterial disease to me with the leaves. Now the pods, the way they have a mosaic pattern on them that you can see here, and blotchiness and distorted, that looks more viral in nature to me. So it may be a couple things going on. It wouldn't be bad to eat them if it is this. It's not going to affect you that way. But in the future, again, trying to use sanitation and then look carefully if there was some insect feeding. There's not any insect feeding on these leaves, but if other leaves had insect feeding, that could be a way that viruses were brought in for that mosaic pattern. And then this, if it is the bacterial disease, would probably be in the residue. So trying to maintain sanitation. In the fall, working that material in and trying to get it broken down would be really important for future years. And even if, depending on how large your garden is, if you can rotate the region or space that is at.
All right.
And avoid overhead irrigation. That's everybody. Just
Tell Mother
avoid
Nature.
overhead irrigation.
Turn off the faucet.
Yeah.
All right, you have a couple. Your first two questions, Jeff, are actually from totally different viewers for the exact same plant. The first one here, collected in Missouri, although he lives in Bellevue. And the second one is in Elkhorn. Comes up in our garden every single year. And what is it?
Well, it looks like jewels of opal.
Opar.
Opar. Opar. Okay. And it's, it's a native plant kind of to the south, goes into the Caribbean, South America, that sort of area. And it's reasonably hardy, although it's probably not cold hardy here, but it will reseed itself. And so that's why it's returning every year. It's a succulent. So it's an interesting plant. I think, like Lauren, all parts are edible. So,
Lauren is edible.
So you could eat different parts of it at certain times. You could look that up, but it was kind of interesting looking at some of that information. So
there's actually one called Limon, which is yellow.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Your next one is, she just wants to know what this vine is. I love the
It's a money
dollar,
plant.
the dollar bill for scale. She wants to know what this is. And then your next one is actually something going on with the clematis, because he's got the clematis and then he's got the exact same plant in the clematis, and he wants to know whether it's a good, bad, ugly, and if it's a good, bad, or ugly, does he kill it? So it's the same plant.
Yeah, it's the same plant, both of these. It's a honeyvine milkweed. So it's a tenacious perennial weed, and they're tough to kill. And you really, unfortunately, because they have a rather pleasant foliage appearance, I think many times people let them grow for a while because they grow rapidly, so they'll cover a fence if you wanted to cover the fence and that sort of thing. The downside is once they're well established, they're really difficult to get rid of. And it's something that, you can pull and pull and pull, and they'll continue to come back. And you can try the glove of death or different sprays, and it takes a long time to get rid of them once they get well established. So.
All right. Yes, either love it and leave it, or...
Yeah, I would say this is one in particular I would never let flower.
All right. Excellent.
So.
Thanks, Jeff. Well, we are happy to say that our vegetables are doing great out at our garden. We've got several All-America selections, but tonight Terry James is going to feature an unusual tomato. Let's see what's happening in the Backyard Farmer Garden.
This week in the Backyard Farmer Garden, we're going to continue looking at our new All-America Selection winners. This week we're going to look at a vegetable, tomato actually. It's one that I've actually never grown before either. It's an apple-shaped tomato. This is tomato apple yellow. It's one that's going to be a little bit smaller, but it's actually going to kind of be in the shape of an apple. Incredible performance according to a lot of the judges from the All-America Selection. But this is an indeterminate tomato. It's gonna get to about 6 foot tall, but it's gonna have small apple-shaped fruit, about 1 to 1.5 inches in size, and they're gonna be about 1 ounce each. They're gonna have quite a few. You're gonna be able to harvest them all summer long once they start getting ripe. And you can put them in a container if you need to, but you will definitely need to stake it. It will also need to be staked in the garden too. It's gonna be about 120 days to harvest if you're starting it from seed. So next year, get them started early in the greenhouse. But stop by the Backyard Farmer Garden and check out our new yellow apple tomato.
Right now, it is time for lightning. You ready, Jeff?
I'm ready.
This is a Hastings viewer who, in a very long paragraph, her question finally was, what kills ditchweed?
What kills ditchweed? Well, I think there's a lot of non-selectives that you could choose with that, but I think keeping it mowed, keeping it down, again, not letting it flower and produce seed.
All right, this is a Plattsmouth viewer who wants to know what causes cucumbers to be bitter.
The heat and letting it dry out, so maintaining even moisture helps, and then picking them a little earlier, maybe not letting them ripen so much.
All right, Scotts Bluff viewer wants to know when to move raspberry bushes, spring or fall?
I think you could probably do them both depending on what's going on. I would prefer the spring and let them get established, but if you have a time in the fall after the middle of August, you could give it a try.
All right, this is a Diller viewer who wants to know, is it normal for wisteria to bloom twice in 1 year?
I would say they're a wisteria growing genius. So congratulations. That's fantastic.
We have a viewer who says sap is running from the pine branches, but they were cut 10 years ago. Is that normal?
Well, it sounds like they might have a canker or something. That might almost be a Lauren question. So.
No, yeah, not good.
Yeah.
All right.
Do I get the point for that last
No.
one? That was a disease
You
one.
do
I answered.
not.
Okay.
Could have been an insect,
That's
too.
true.
Could be an insect.
In other words, it's not normal.
Not normal.
All right. You ready, Lauren?
I'm always ready.
What happened to lunch meat? Okay.
I bought pastrami today. I'm ready like pastrami.
All right, pastrami. So this is a South Sioux City viewer who says their raspberries are setting on nicely, but they're getting gray and moldy. What is that?
Oh, it's botrytis fruit rot.
And then they want to know what can they do about it.
For the second answer of the evening, they can avoid overhead irrigation and use some sanitation, open it up, get some good air movement. Could use a fungicide. I hate to do that in the backyard though.
All right. This is a spruce near Bennett, and all of the new growth tips are dead. Is that a disease or is that insect?
It could be. Serococcus shoot blight does that in spruce. So if it's a zone, a small area of the tree, make sure the sprinkler's not hitting that zone of the tree. That'll make it worse. Use some sanitation, and next year look at a potential spray schedule for the tree.
All right. This is a Columbus viewer who wants to know whether they should use Epsom salts and or borax for lawn diseases.
No.
We have a Lions viewer who has a whole colony of shrooms at the base of an old oak. Is that the death knell for that tree?
It could be. Yeah, might be. Most likely it is. Depending on what kind of. Okay, lightning. So I can explain this. Depending on what kind of mushroom it is, it could be just something growing at the base on something else. If there's mulch, it could be growth out of the tree. It really depends on what it is.
Right. Thank you.
Don't eat them.
All right, Jody, are you ready?
Okay.
Okay. This is a Tecumseh viewer who thinks that the reason they have so many Japanese beetles in their yard is that the eggs came in a load of manure that was used for compost. Would that be correct?
I don't think so, because don't those have to be treated if they were? I don't think so. I mean, they're flying in from everywhere.
All right. This is an Omaha viewer who wants to know whether paper wasps are good guys or bad guys.
Ooh, they're kind of a little bit of both, but if they're in a high traffic area and anyone's allergic, I would probably say to get rid of them.
All right. Speaking of which, a Bellevue viewer wants to know how to get rid of cicada wasps.
Okay, so if you want to get rid of those and you don't want to use like a tennis racket or a net, then you probably have to treat every single hole with insecticidal dust.
All right. This is an Arlington viewer who said he was stung by a black wasp with a blue metallic sheen. What would that
Okay,
be?
well, we've got the steel blue cricket hunter, which these all are solitary, so I'm not really sure how they would be stinging unless they were pressed against the body or touched or stepped on. There's also a great black wasp that are on plants, and then there's like a blue mud dauber, but none of those are really aggressive, so that's interesting. But there are
Excellent.
many beautiful blue, shiny, iridescent wasps.
That will sting you. All right. Plants of the week, Jeff.
Well, Kim, you brought in a couple different things here. So we'll talk about the purple balloon flower first. As we can see, we have the little balloons here. And so this is a plant that we have this in several places on campus as well. We have white ones and the purple or blue ones. They do really well. They have a long period of flowering, which makes them fun. And in certain situations, if they're really happy, you may end up with more balloon flowers, maybe on the other side of the sidewalk or, behind something or someplace where you didn't think you'd have balloon flowers. So they can spread if they're really happy. This is a plant that also produces a gas, and the plant itself can create some sensitivity in some people. So I always suggest to our staff when they're first working with it to wear gloves and make sure, because some people can be sensitive to some of the plant parts. So that's something to keep in mind. The yellow one we have here is cup plant. So this is a really tall, can be 3 to 5 feet tall, likes moist areas, sandy areas. You may find it kind of on the edge of a woodland area, something like that, transition area. So it's a native plant. does really well. What else should I say?
Native Americans.
Native
used-
Americans drank out of it. That's why it gives it the cup. So you can see here with the leaves, the way they form a cup. So
Perfect. And our backyard farmer one is covered with pollinators. So
is it in a low area?
Nope.
No, it's not.
no, but when it is in a low area, it gallops.
Okay.
So you have to be a little careful with it.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Jeff. All right, you have 4 in a row here, Jody. The first one is, she says this insect was on her Trinidad Moruga scorpion plant. What is it, good, bad, or indifferent?
Do you have squash nearby? If you have squash nearby, then it's bad. This is the squash vine borer moth, but I don't know what a Trinidad scorpion is, but I really want one.
All right, so bad guy if you have
It's
squash.
pretty, yeah.
All right, then we have a viewer who said her children came across a few of these in the backyard. She wants to know, friend or enemy. She says it's got weird texture like odd hair.
It's so cute. This is a milkweed tussock moth. They look like little Shih Tzu dogs that you could carry in a purse. They are on the milkweed. They do not compete with like the new milkweed that the monarchs like, so there's room for both. But yeah, they're super cute. They will turn into a moth that's not as cute.
All right. Your third one here is he found some interesting creatures, and he wonders what this one
Okay,
is.
so this is another type of tussock moth, but this one is got stinging spines and hair, so you don't want to touch this one. This is not a cute little puppy. This is the white marked tussock moth. Usually, they're not a lot of them to be a problem, so I would just let it go, admire it. It's cool.
All right, and your final one here is a West Point viewer found this little buddy. Wants to know what he's going to grow up to be.
Okay, this one's going to grow up to be an eastern tiger swallowtail. So it's a very strange looking. It looks like a snake, actually, but it's going to be a beautiful butterfly.
Perfect. All right, Lauren.
If I had to redo,
Those are
if I had to
awesome
redo,
ones.
I would be an entomologist. They have
the
so many
best.
cool things they get to see.
But they don't get corn smut.
They don't get corn smut though.
All right. So this viewer is in Roca. He wants to know what's going on with his tomatoes.
That looks like a soft rot. Now there's blossom end rot, but based on the location, that looks like it could have been possibly sun scalded and then molding, would be my guess there.
All right. Your next one is, these are in pots. This is San Marzano, old mixed soil. The other was newer bagged.
This is one of the best examples of blossom end rot I think I have ever seen. So, and this is because if they're in a pot, there's probably not consistent moisture.
Right.
And it is a calcium deficiency, but it's most likely due to the inadequate consistent moisture that's causing this.
And we've seen that a lot in container-grown tomatoes this year.
Especially when it's hot.
Right.
They just don't get enough moisture.
And your third one is, she found this fuzzy stuff on the bottom of the stem. What's this?
This is so cool. I actually sent this to a friend or one of our faculty in the plant path department. I wasn't exactly sure, but once he said it, what it was, I remembered it. This is actually a slime mold. So most of our viewers have seen us talk about different types of slime mold. This is one that is called the chocolate tube slime, and you can look it up. It's one of those amoeboid-like organisms that moves around, actually.
That someone ate on
Kinda cool.
air and was sorry.
Don't eat it. Don't even try it.
All right, Jeff, you got some that are tree-based and questions about herbicide. This is in Butler County on a 4-acre parcel. It's looked like this for several years. We think this is herbicide, or do
You know,
really
and this is one I'd almost kind of throw at Lauren, because for 4 years, herbicide damage, I find that, and because I think they also commented all the other trees are fine.
Right, yeah,
Any ideas? I mean, I know it's kind of,
hard to tell.
Is it distorted growth?
it's
Is it
curled
like a,
leaves and distorted growth, yes.
Is it like a tatters, possibly?
It
Or
didn't seem
didn't
like
look-
it.
look
It
close up,
looks
I didn't
like
look close
a
up.
herbicide damage or some sort of insect
There
aphid
is
where it's
a lot of oak problems. I think there's probably lace bugs in some of them too. If
Okay.
you can uncurl them and you can see like little black spots, those are lace bugs feeding on some of those newer ones.
Okay.
They'll cause that. And I've also seen a lot of oak shot hole borer this year. They're little like flies that create like all these holes in the middle of the leaf.
So I guess for that viewer, perhaps go out, pull the leaves apart, look in there, maybe
See.
take some pictures, send them to us if they're
Right.
seeing some insects. and
Send
that
some
sort of
really
thing.
close-ups.
Yeah.
All right.
Another thing could be oak anthracnose.
Right.
Okay.
would be
all right.
another that could be, and it would just affect
Over
one
a
tree.
4-year period.
Could
like this.
consistently have,
Yeah.
but
Right.
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so then your next one here is, she's wondering, is this dicamba damage?
Sure looks like a herbicide damage. So yes, and I think if they felt like they had been exposed to that, then right.
Yeah, and she wonders, can she eat anything in the garden if she's seeing this dicamba injury?
You know, I would say that if plants have been affected by dicamba, they shouldn't be very productive. That's going to be one thing. So it probably makes sense to rogue out. I'm sitting next to Mr. Rogue, so rogue out those plants anyway. It would make sense to do that and start over. If it's, you know, if you have one little leaf that you think looks a little funny, I think you're probably fine.
All right, and then your final one here is an oak that is curling and does have those bumps on it. This again, there were a couple of herbicides used to try to kill water hemp in the garden area.
Right, and it's a brush killer, actually. I think the one that they,
Yeah.
so, and I think that's one thing, you know, I was talking to someone earlier today about the fact that a lot of our herbicides are so good, I mean, they can translocate pretty quickly into the root system of a neighboring shrub. So
So,
even some of the pre-emergents, I get a little,
Worried about.
yeah,
yeah,
so.
exactly. All right. Well, if you've been following our companion Facebook program, Digging Deeper, you've seen several programs devoted to getting children involved in nature and gardening. We first saw Hartmans Hill in Clarkson in 2017. We thought we'd take a few minutes tonight to show you how the pollinator garden and the outdoor classroom has grown since that feature.
This program, we started this project in the year 2014-15 with the help of the statewide Arboretum and Pheasants Forever and some local volunteers who donated some money and time. And what we created up here was a pollinator habitat, and we use it right now as our outdoor classroom. It's pretty much established. We have planted some newer trees, but for the most part, everything is now set in place for this to be an outdoor classroom that we use quite frequently throughout our school year. When we stumbled upon this area in about 2014, we stumbled upon it on accident, and the only thing growing up here was brome grass. There was some thistle growing and a few just trashy trees. So with the help of the grant and some hard work, we tilled up the area, and Pheasants Forever helped us with some native seed for the area. And as you can tell, the wildflowers have started to establish nicely. So what was once just total brome, now we have a nice variety. We do have some native grasses growing, as well as we have some nice pollinators for the bees and the butterflies and all that stuff that we're trying to keep around our area. Also, the trees that were up here were just the elm trees. So we have some nice oak trees happening up here, and we also have some serviceberry trees that we are growing back down one of the paths as well. What I'm trying to do here just overall is have the kids build a connection with their natural world. Because if they don't have that understanding of what it's like here in Nebraska in our prairie ecosystem, why do they want to take care of it? Why are they, when they are older, going to want to create a garden of their own? Why are they going to want to go to nurseries and pull plants that are native to our area that will help maintain just the ecosystem that we live in? The main way we utilize our outdoor classroom is by giving kids an opportunity for unstructured play. It seems this day and age, our kids are scheduled from the time they wake up in the morning until the time they go to bed at night. Through school, scheduled activities, and extracurricular activities, we can provide kids an opportunity with a place where they can just come up here and be kids, play, push their physical boundaries, and it's on their time without a lot of guidance from me. I let them feel like they're taking risks without actually taking risks. They are up here getting dirty, they're getting their hands on the plants, they are observing things with just a natural curiosity that oftentimes as we get older we tend to lose. I also love the fact that we're getting them away from screen time, and they are up here just with the opportunity to be a kid.
We really enjoyed our visit with Wes. So encouraging to see those kids outside enjoying that area. What's not to enjoy? It's just fabulous. All right, last round here. Jody, this is Ponca, Nebraska. And you have 2 viewers, and the other one's from Raymond, and they have had issues with these little critters getting into the house. They come back each day. Now they're back. What are they? They want them gone for good.
Okay, they're greenhouse millipedes, and the people who complain about them get them by like the hundreds or thousands. There's not really a way to get rid of them because they're just in the soil, and we don't know if they're migrating or mating or whatever. But treating them really doesn't help because they're gonna come up and die close by anyway. So if you treat them, they're gonna die and you're gonna have to clean it up. If you don't treat them, they're gonna die and you have to clean it up. So just clean it up and try to seal all the entrances that they could be getting into the house.
All right, your next one is a Syracuse viewer. She's got this stuff on the floor every day next to the baseboard. She doesn't see insects.
Okay, so this looks like some type of frass, and it looks like some type of ant kickout. So whatever's above that, if it's like I suspect it's like a window frame, I would try to pull that off and see if there's ants and damage in there. And if you see ants, then, I would replace the wood if there's any damage. And you can bait if you see foragers, but there's not really anything to do if you don't see any insects.
All right, and your third one here is this little guy and his extended family apparently almost devoured all the young basil plants in a day. What is this? And she wonders if her, she's found them in the house hitching a ride. She wonders if everything in the house is also in danger, and this is rural Valparaiso.
No, but I have had a lot of calls about these getting in the house, and more so them being like structural annoyances than like a vegetable pest. But these are imported longhorn weevils, and they will feed on certain things. In your house though, I would vacuum and use a lint roller if they're coming in on your clothes, but they're really on the screen doors and just trying to get in. But if you need to treat your plants because there's a lot of damage, then I would probably try something that's like pyrethrin or something that has a really low like pre-harvest interval, because if you treat with insecticides and you're going to use that basil, then you want to be aware of that.
All right, thanks, Jody. All right, we had a lot of turf issue questions last week for Bill, and so you get them this week. The first one, this is Midtown Omaha. She wonders, these first 2 pictures, what is this messing up her yard? And what do you think that one is?
So there's a couple things here. When I see this, okay, so there's some helminthosporium leaf spots that are common that can be this time of year. With the warmer temperature, we've seen more brown patch than anything, pretty much. But this looks like a helminthosporium leaf spot. Will go up and down in severity. The standard thing would be make sure you're watering in the morning, that your irrigation system's running in the morning. Make sure you're not fertilizing this time of year. And then you could go to a fungicide if you really want to control it. This one isn't going to typically kill the yard, but it can thin it and get down into the crown of the turf and thin it.
All right, and your next one is they show this. There were some others that showed a close-up, but not a great close-up.
So when you see this this is difficult to identify. So I see some smokiness or dark discoloration around the edges of those that might suggest brown patch, but without seeing the leaves, it's really hard to say. There's a lot of things could cause that. So try to get some close-ups of the leaf blades if you can, even pulling a plant up and taking a picture of it with the root system to see what that looks like if you send it in. That would help a lot.
All right, excellent. Thanks, Lauren. All right, you have 4 left.
Okay.
Okay. So this one is fun. This is, this is Lincoln, planted a very small pawpaw. It's done very well, but most are more like a shrub. So he's wondering, should he prune this into a shrub or let it be a tree?
He shouldn't prune it. Put your pruners away. It's fine. It's just fine. So pawpaws in an open area like this do great. They perform great. They have a nice pyramidal form. I know he said he hasn't gotten a lot of fruit yet. Give it time, it will. But no, that's great. I have 2 like that in my yard.
Perfect.
In an open area, they're beautiful trees.
And I have the shrub in my yard because the main trunk died, but it's still beautiful.
And over time, it will start to kind of try to colonize, and that's something to keep an eye on.
Right. All right. Your second one here, this is an Imperial, Nebraska viewer. She has a hackberry. She doesn't want to have turf at the base of it. She's wondering planters or ground cover or mulch. And we always advise don't dig up and raise the crown. So she's wondering mulch without anything to retain it, will it end up in the yard? What are we going to recommend here?
You know, it may a little bit, you know, and you can go in and put in, you know, a thinner edging. You can use brick or wood or something that isn't really deep, so you're not excavating a large area around it. And if you go out far enough, if you're out 3-4 feet from the base of the tree, you shouldn't hit major roots. And, you know, if you do, I'll just cut the mulch or the whatever and form it around that root. So you should be able to work with it.
All right, and your third one here is from Stromsburg. This is a birch going on its 4th year. We've got one picture of the chlorosis in it, and I think we have a second picture of the base of the tree. She thinks it's lack of water. What do we think it is?
Well, it could be a variety of things. I mean, it doesn't look like it's planted too deep, but that would be one of those first things that you start to look at if a tree kind of continuously declines. Having a larger mulch ring around it, and maybe if it's a dry area, birches tend to want a little bit more water, so you may have to do supplemental watering. The other thing too is they're susceptible to bronze birch borer, and so that would be, and there's some holes in the trunk there, so I mean that would be the other thing that I was always worried about, and if we're having some dieback over a period of time, that might be something that we would think about.
Right, so maybe not long for this earth on that one.
Yeah.
All right. Well, of course, we do announcements of fun things in the gardening world, and we have a couple of them. The first being our Grow Big Red virtual learning series, which is Tomato Troubles. You can see the registration on it every Tuesday through September. I know, Jody, you've been on that, and it's quite the deal so far. A lot of fun. Our viewers are liking that a lot. And our second one is, of course, us, Digging Deeper with Backyard Farmer. You can watch us on Facebook Thursdays, right after Backyard Farmer, 8 p.m. Central. And you can follow us on Backyard Farmer in NET, Nebraska. We always have really good conversations on that. All right, we have a handful of minutes and a handful of questions. So this is an interesting one, Jody. This is a McClelland, Iowa viewer. They had sweet corn that tasseled, and then all of the tassels bent and broke. They've never had it happen before. Have you been getting any questions about an insect in the tassel, or is this something to do with either pathology or environment? Any ideas on that one?
I do not know.
Was it wind related? There is some of our corn plants will green snap. Usually it's lower than the tassel, but there are some conditions that will result in that. They won't bend and snap. It'll just be wind and they'll snap.
Right, yeah, and I wondered about that too, because we've had such strange wind both here in Iowa. Yeah.
That would be one idea.
All right.
They should see some feeding in the stalk if it was an insect boring enough to break the stem.
In there.
On there.
Yeah. Oh, pull that silk when it's ready and get that nice little tasty bite of protein with your sweet corn, right?
No.
No.
Thanks for answering that for me.
So you have one, Lauren, that is, this is a viewer that has cedar, but nice big old cedars. She has several great big conchs or shrooms all the way up and down the trunk.
Oh, beautiful. How wonderful.
Yeah, she's wondering, of course, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a bad thing, but it's beautiful. So, unfortunately, when you see conchs on the outside of the tree, usually there's damage inside the tree, and that's the fruiting structure of that fungus.
Right.
Now, on the other side, cedars typically, standability is pretty high usually, so even with that, I'd be hard pressed to see that as a hazard tree if it's a cedar.
All right. Jeff, you have like 10 seconds to answer this question, which is you had bee balm, and we did have a question from people wondering whether they should deadhead it, and if they do, will it reflower?
I don't know, Kim. I would say, I really don't. You know, I don't deadhead ours, so.
Yeah, it doesn't reflower.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, they can deadhead if they want, but no more flowers anyway.
Okay, all right.
All right.